And a fine, good Sunday morning to everyone. For those that don't know me yet, my name is Deacon Taylor. I've been asked and have accepted the opportunity to run as the vice presidential candidate for the Veterans Party of America, thanks to Mr. Chris Keniston, our future president, and the presidential candidate for the Veterans Party of America in 2016. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about this concept of climate change or global warming or whatever buzzword you want to try to use today. In the last few days, there's been some interactions on social media with folks that are upset at a lot of the things that I post. They take things very, very literally, as often happens when you look at things on the internet. It's really hard to understand somebody's intent or somebody's real message behind something on Facebook or any form of social media for that matter. You lose the facial expressions, you lose the connotation of voice influxes and so forth. So today let's talk about this concept. Now, to put it bluntly, I believe that human beings have and continue to dramatically affect our global climate. I'm not some weirdo that sits in a closet and worries about the cataclysmic end of humanity. I'm not somebody that supports the ridiculous nonsense that the EPA has become, that the current administration is using to force industry standards that aren't even realistic or achievable at this point because we've gotten to the point of an exponential curve where things are absurd. So what's the real solutions? And first, let me backtrack and go into why I believe that human beings are dramatically affecting our climate. So, if you look at the population growth curve of humanity, it stayed at or below 1 billion people for centuries. I mean, like several centuries, if not all the way back to the time of Christ himself. Then all of a sudden, in the 1800s, we have this very rapid ascending exponential curve line of human growth as a species. And we go from 1 billion approximately in 1800 to 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion to 7 billion people in less than 200 years. Most of that growth in the last 100 years. Now, what correlates with that growth? The Industrial Revolution. So, fossil fuels have allowed us, as a species, to populate in a way that doesn't seem very sustainable to me overall. Now, don't take that out of context and don't try to make me into some kind of a freak that wants to kill off 90% of the population, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is everything in a system is in balance. And when we increase exponentially the number of human beings on this planet, we are going to have an effect. We're going to have a big effect. Look at the amount of forests that are cut down year by year. Look at the amount of mining operations we have going on a global scale. Look at the air quality in China. Look at the air quality in the United States in the 1970s. Look at what's happening in the oceans with the acidity levels and with the bleaching of the coral reefs. Look at the fishing problems that we're having in these areas that have been overfished. Look at what we did to the buffalo herds in the 18 and 1900s, where you can see images from the 1900s where thousands and thousands of buffalo are left dead and skinned because we wanted their hides. And tell me, how in God's name can you not understand that we as a species are impacting our planet in ways we don't comprehend? So this whole politicized crap about global warming or climate change and all of the nuanced issues around it, the one organization or the one set of organizations that seems to continually pop up from time to time in our society, the Heartland Institute. And if you've ever watched Thank You for Smoking, the Merchants of Death, as they called themselves in the movie, represented what that Institute for Tobacco Studies was all about. Their entire mission was to create this question or doubt in the minds of the consumers. And now they've morphed into some kind of a climate organization. I mean, come on, folks. We can't be that naive. We can't be that naive to believe that organizations that are making massive amounts of money with the sole intent of creating doubt in the mind of consumers are actually in it to educate us. And it's just like the same thing that our Congress is doing when they name legislation, the Patriot Act. And then we have to have somebody like Snowden come out and expose the Patriot Act for what it really is. And so now they rebrand it the Freedom Act. They didn't take hardly any of the stuff out of it, but yet they rebrand it in a way that makes it sound good for us. So I'm sorry if my personal views are upsetting to people, but the reality is we as a species have had dramatic impacts on this planet, and we will continue to do so. That's kind of how a enclosed system works. We don't have a way to bring in outside resources. We don't have a way to deal with all of that. Now, if you look back through history, several millions of years ago, the oxygen levels on this planet were around 30% at the time of the dinosaurs. How do we know that? Because insects grow exponentially larger when they have more oxygen, because their limitations are the little blood vessels that run through their joints. And so in order to grow bigger than they are today, they had to have more oxygen. And so scientists have figured out how to understand what the atmospheric conditions were even at the time of dinosaurs. Now, that's what I would call real science. And I have a bunch of people that get really upset because I talk about carbon dioxide levels and how can we possibly know what the atmosphere was like that many millions of years ago? Well, again, through real science, we can actually understand what the real atmosphere was like. There has never been a time in the history of our planet that we have access to that information that the carbon dioxide levels are as high as they are today. Now, that doesn't mean we need to overregulate industry. That doesn't mean that we need to put in place a bunch of really ridiculous policies. What that means is we as a society need to decide what we value. Okay? And as a society, we're going to figure out what the right solutions are. Now, I come from a background of building science. I grew up on a ranch in northern Wyoming where physical science was a huge part of my education. Taking care of approximately 120 cows and their calves, and mending fences, and building buildings, and working on our house in the wintertime when it was too cold to be outside, and on and on and on, I learned an awful lot. So let me tell you about the house that I grew up in. It was a 1910 farmhouse in the very northern part of Wyoming. And it was so cold and drafty that when you would sit down on the floor at night during the winter, you could hold a match in your hand 6 inches off the floor and the wind blowing through the house would put it out. Now that wind came from our fireplace because our fireplace was an open air fireplace. And the more wood you put on it, the more air it would push up and out of the house because hot air rises. And so cold air would have to come in and replace it. So if you were sitting right by the fireplace, it was great. But if you were sitting 10 feet away or 15 feet away or up in our bedrooms that were not connected to the rooms, then it was a pretty miserable house. So my old man decided that it was time to do something about it, so he contacted his cousin. We borrowed an insulation machine, and we drilled and filled all of the exterior walls of the house because they were lath and plaster on the inside and lapboard siding on the outside. So we did it from the outside, and we insulated the entire house. My dad, my brother, myself, and I think we might have had a cousin that was there too. I can't remember. It's too long ago. I was about 9, maybe 10. We replaced all the windows because they were the old lead weight wooded windows with single pane. And so those windows were unbelievably drafty. Now, the new windows that are out today, the double panes and the more advanced systems, they don't have that problem. So even if you have 1970s windows, they're not that bad. But you got lead weight windows that slide up and down with the sash. The lead weights go up and down inside of the window wells. Those things were miserable and drafty and unbelievably inefficient. And so we replaced them. Then, to cap it all off, we did the attic, and we went through the exterior of the house, and we put about an inch of foam board on the outside and then vinyl siding. We did that for aesthetics, but what we didn't know at the time is that 1 inch of foam board made a huge difference in the way the house performed. We also went so far as to that summer, it was probably 10 or 11 at the time when we did it in the summer, we took down the entire fireplace, brick by brick, and my brother and I chiseled mortar off of bricks for the better part of a summer. Yay, it was really fun. But what my dad did with that is he had a mason come in, and we did an enclosed fireplace with a Blaze King style box fireplace that drew fresh air from outside to feed the fire and then exhausted up and through the chimney, but it was a potbelly stove style. So all the heat from that fireplace came into the house. Then he decided that he wanted a backup system in case we ever went to sleep and the fireplace went out at night. So he put in a central furnace system where we use ducting, and we put the cold air return right next to the fireplace area. And there's some things that we did wrong, there's no doubt. But what the concept was is you would flip the fan switch on, and all of a sudden you could take the heat from the living room and you could push it up into the bedrooms and bathrooms, which when I was little, and the bathrooms at the far end on the opposite side of the house upstairs, you could actually see water freezing on the walls while you were taking your showers in the morning. Wasn't that fun? So building science was kind of part of my nature anyway. I learned this stuff as a very young boy because we used to cut 26 cords of firewood every year. And if you don't understand what a cord of firewood is, imagine a stack that's 4 feet wide by 4 feet tall by 8 feet long, solid wood, and that is approximately 1 cord from my understandings. We used to cut 26 of those a year. And we would cut and stack it by Thanksgiving in order to make it through the Wyoming winter in that 1910 farmhouse. Now, once we got done with all of these improvements that my dad had basically decided that it was time to fix the house, we didn't really know what we were doing. It wasn't science-based back in the 70s and 80s. It was, the house isn't insulated, let's insulate it. The windows suck, let's fix them. You know, that kind of a methodology. It was the physical science concepts that make sense. And we went from a 26 cords of firewood heating load in the winter down to about 5. So the last year we cut 26 cords of firewood, I was the happiest kid on the planet because the next summer we didn't hardly burn any of it. And the next summer we still had some left. And the next summer we still had some left. And so over about 4 or 5 years, it finally dawned on me, oh my God, this building science thing, this makes sense to me. And so after I got out of the military, that's what I got into. So the solutions to our problems are not to over-regulate and over-engineer and over-complicate the entire systems that we use as a society. It goes back to this concept of the cartoonist show Dr. Seuss Lorax. You know, you can't possibly look at how many of us there are and look at the resources that we are consuming and explain to me in a rational way that we aren't impacting what's happening on our planet. But the solutions are not what the current administration are doing. The solutions are to educate people on what's possible. And what I know is possible is we can have homes that actually perform. We can have cars that get hundreds of miles to the gallon. We cannot have our grid so overtaxed that transformers are blowing and we're having brownouts like we used to have. We can actually do things that will help the American public have more money in their pocket at the end of every year and be more comfortable in their homes and their daily lives at the same time. I can show you hundreds of buildings that I took with building science, either nearly off-grid or to the point where they could be off-grid if the customer wanted them to be. And that's not a bad thing. And we didn't do it spending thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. We did it in very low cost, very methodical, very intelligent ways where we were able to reduce the load by fixing the building shell and improving the way it worked. We were able to right-size the equipment that managed that building. And then we were able to start talking about food resources and living landscapes. We were able to talk about water reclamation using biosystems like reeds and ponds and fish and things that nature uses. All of these things are possible. So for anyone that thinks that I'm some kind of going to regulate your life to death because I happen to believe that climate change is a reality, you can rest assured that is not my personality type. I'm from Wyoming. Don't forget that. We don't like big government. So, hope you all have a great day. Look forward to meeting more of you on the way. And please, look past your biases when you read things on the internet. There's a lot more behind the story than just a quick 30-second soundbite or a quick snippet that you read in one line. So, love y'all, and God bless this country. I know we can make it the great nation that it is, and we can bring it back to the American people. Have a nice day.